I'm Mark Burnell and I'm a professional horse dentist. By all means, please get your horse's teeth checked regularly. Depending on what you feed your horse, dictates how often their teeth need to be checked. It's very important that you select the right bit according to what you are asking your horse to do or expecting it to do. The thing to remember with bits is that size and shape's important. This is one of the oldest bits I have. It's well over 100 years old and it's handmade. And most bits pre the car era were this shape. This shape's now been copied in the JP range, and it's important that your horse, as much as possible, gets to wear a bit that is this shape. A simple rule we use is the 2-finger rule. And when you hold a bit together, you should be able to get 2 fingers in there. So this shape, they also call it a frog mouth, is important that the horse wears a bit that's fairly much this shape. Years ago, bits were made specifically, everything was this shape. So this bit was made pre-World War II, and pretty much any bit manufactured from this era was this shape. So it's only recently, as horses have become more of a leisure item, that bits have changed shape, things look prettier, and we've gone for different things. As you can see, this is an entirely different shape. It's very fat. Here we have a bit where the 2-finger rule simply doesn't work. So having the right shape of bit in your horse's mouth goes a long way towards making the horse comfortable and hopefully happy. Some of the different bits that we use depending on what you're doing. Here's a driving bit. This is also a curb bit. We'll talk about them later. Curb bits are where there's a large distance between where the cheek piece goes and where the rein sits. And the further the rein is away from the cheek piece, the greater the leverage action and the control on the horse's head. So it's important that you have a bit that's appropriate to what you're doing and that your horse is comfortable and therefore controllable. Always check your bits. I picked this bit up in Malaysia and unfortunately it did that in the horse's mouth. So always make sure that your bits, it's often one of the cheapest things you buy when purchasing a horse, that everything's safe and continues to work properly. Depending on what you're doing, you may choose a jointed bit. Here we have the simple snaffle type bits. This is a loose ring snaffle, and these are an excellent shaped bit, very comfortable for the horse. Depending on what you're doing, you may choose to have an egg butt bit, such as this, which deals with the shape and the fit into the horse's cheek. Then we have the straight bits, and all different types of products have been made over the last 30 and 40 years. We go from the steel through to the rubber, which under pressure takes a different shape again. But here we have a bit that's designed for the comfort of the horse. This sits up into the palate with the horse's tongue underneath. Here we have an apple flavoured PVC, which under pressure once again falls into the shape that's hundreds of years old. Some bits, here we have Kimberwicks or Spanish snaffles. These lumps here are called a port, and this is for comfort for the horse. So depending on the shape of your horse's head, whether you chose a large port or a more shallow port, such as this bit, it affects how comfortable it is on the horse. Sometimes we need greater control of the horse to control their speed, and this is where bits such as this is called a W snaffle. We have 2 nutcracker actions. The nutcracker action is where the bit bends at the join, and this can be quite severe in the wrong hands. Another bit which gives greater braking control on the horse is the running gag. So this not only puts pressure on the horse's lips and cheeks when you pull on the reins, but it also puts pressure on the bridle and pulls the horse's poll downwards. These buckles here attach to the bridle and the reins attach to the loops, and as you pull on the reins, the bit gets pulled through the round leather and puts greater pressure on the horse's mouth. These can be quite severe as well. But if you have a horse that's pulling or gets somewhat out of control, perhaps in cross country or trail riding, this may be a suitable option. But once again, seek professional advice before purchasing something such as this. The nutcracker action is where The bit folds in the middle. Here we have a copper roller bit. Now, copper rollers have a function. They work like a battery. You actually have two different metals, copper and steel, in the horse's mouth. In the horse's mouth there's saliva, which is an electrolyte solution, and you get electron transfer between these two different metals. So from the horse's perspective, it's like licking a battery. But this makes dry-mouthed horses or unresponsive horses will concentrate more because this is somewhat annoying in the horse's mouth. Unfortunately, this bit is quite a bad shape. So every time you pull on the reins, whether you're asking the horse to turn left, turn right, to stop or rein back, which are the 4 basic commands to the horse while wearing a bridle, this is going to poke the horse in the palate, which for some horses they find quite annoying, and you get some unexpected behavioural responses to that. And as you can see by the shape of this bit, it's quite V-shaped in comparison to the shape that we're looking for that's hundreds of years old, the frog mouth shape or the JP shape. Okay, here we have a skull of a 14-year-old thoroughbred. The bit sits in between the front teeth, which are the incisors, they're for nipping the grass or pulling hay out of a hay net, and the molars, which are the grinding teeth or cheek teeth that sit up at the back of the jaw. The bit should ideally sit in front of the teeth, on top of the tongue, resting against the palate. The palate's a fairly sensitive part of the horse's anatomy, and the anatomy of the horse's head is very similar to ours. They're mammals, we're mammals. We have similar bone names but different shapes to those bones. We have the hard palate here with the soft palate and a semicircular piece of bone behind it. And even though this is called the hard palate, which separates the mouth cavity from the nasal cavity, the bone you can see is quite paper thin. And on a live horse this would be covered with a piece of gum, and this is a fairly sensitive part of the horse. So every time you use the bit's going to put not only pressure on the creases and the cheeks of the horse, but also the palate and the tongue underneath it, and also in some cases the bars of the jaw, which are these two bones here in the mandible. An important concept for people to remember is that horses weren't born to have bits in their mouth. That's something we've done to the horse in order to control and communicate what we want the horse to do on our behalf. So in the last 2,000 years there's been a lot of innovation in bits, and it's important to remember that horses weren't born to have bits in their mouth. That's something we've imposed upon them. This structure is actually designed to get grass off the ground, chew it up finely and swallow it and digest it, so they have lots of energy to run around with their friends and hopefully reproduce some babies. We're just lucky that horses have a fairly good temperament and allow us to put things, wool boy, like this in the horse's mouth. Now remember, there's no room in the horse's mouth for a bit, because the tongue is actually going to push the food from the incisors, which are the front teeth, up to the molars at the back to be chewed up. We want the bit to sit forward of the molars slightly, and this would actually put pressure on the tongue and in some cases actually get the horse to slightly open his mouth. When you're riding the horse, it's preferable that their mouth is closed but not clenched shut. We'll talk about this later. So this horse, to be comfortable, may have to open his mouth somewhat, which is not an entirely desirable outcome. So that's where, in some cases, a thinner bit is preferable to a large fat bit, depending on the horse. Every horse is different, and what they enjoy working in and understanding is important for the owner to work out for themselves.